They were playing something bass-heavy, an obscure remix of Saint Etienne, when the message came through. I remember because the vibration of the speakers rippled through the legs of my chair and disturbed the surface of my champagne like a warning. We're going younger, nothing personal. 6 words, no subject line, no signature, just the hollow thud of finality dressed as progress. I blinked once, hoping the letters might realign themselves, spell out something else, something reversible. But no, my name wasn't even in it. Around me, the Calvera runway show thundered forward. Models carved the air with their cheekbones, the kind of impossible geometry that turns heads and closes million-euro deals. The audience clapped on cue, awash in velvet scent and self-satisfaction. I didn't move. My hand still resting on the flute remained steady. 12 years, weekends, red eyes, 6 cities in 4 days. I'd built Calvera's global identity from shadows and neon, from old-world couture to modern provocation. And now I was obsolete by text. Someone brushed past behind me and muttered something about the new VP of Innovation with a forced laugh. I kept my eyes on the runway. If they were watching me, if they knew what had just happened, I wouldn't give them the performance they were hoping for. Beside me, a man shifted slightly. I hadn't noticed him earlier, which was unusual. The VIP section at Fashion Week is never quiet, but he was. Charcoal suit, no visible branding, just an elegant watch, and the calm that comes from knowing you don't have to prove anything. He didn't turn, didn't speak, just raised his glass of water and nodded as if to the room. Water. That alone made him different. My phone buzzed again, a junior associate I barely remembered. So sorry to hear, Miss Kane. You were a force. Were. I stared at that word so long it stopped looking like language. I set the glass down and folded my hands in my lap. The lights dimmed for the finale and applause surged around us. I didn't move. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. The man beside me waited until the lights came back up. Then he leaned in, voice low, steady. You took that text well, he said. Most would have stormed out. I turned my head and finally met his eyes. Backstage smelled like warm stage lights, perfume and nerves. Models slipped past in silk and lacquered heels. Handlers whispered timing cues, and photographers moved like predators with lenses for eyes. I knew this rhythm, it used to belong to me. No one looked directly at me. My old VP Dax Hillier was leaning near the lighting grid, all post-show exuberance and fake humility. I walked past him without slowing, and he flinched, just slightly. His hand touched his neck like he wasn't sure if he should wave or disappear. I didn't stop. Let him wonder. The PR coordinator, Elise, was already giving interviews, my role listed as creative consultant emerita in the background of her speech. They'd already rewritten the press materials. Calvera was never messy. The brand always moved faster than its blood trail. The intern I once pushed into her first styling session, Mira saw me coming and tucked behind a curtain. She used to text me at midnight for fashion history resources. Now she acted like she didn't recognize me. I didn't blame her. I wouldn't want to be seen choosing the wrong side either. One of the photographers caught a shot of me near the exit. Pure reflex flash on shutter click. I didn't flinch. If they wanted an image of me leaving, they'd get one worth printing. Outside, the night air was unseasonably warm for February. Paris streetlights blurred against the dark sky. I didn't call for the car. I walked. Past the press vans, past influencers taking post-show selfies against the marble columns, past assistants laughing at something on a phone that wasn't mine. They were already forgetting me. But forgetting is a fragile process. It assumes nothing sharp is left behind. I passed a boutique window featuring Calvera's newest campaign, the one I helped cast style and name. They'd color-corrected it too harshly. It looked lifeless, like it didn't remember where it came from. I turned the corner and kept walking, not toward a hotel, not toward a plan, just forward. The sound of heels behind me matched my pace, then slowed. A voice measured and low. Ms. Kane. May I offer you a ride? I turned toward the voice, and there he was, again, charcoal suit, no tie, the same quiet confidence as before. He stood by a black sedan, the door already held open by a driver with no questions. Miss Kane, he said, nodding slightly. Just Alaric, if you prefer. I already knew the name. Alaric Sorel, the man who had taken Maison Leora from fussy legacy brand to whispered obsession in 5 seasons. His name didn't travel loudly, but it traveled well. I slid into the car without answering. We didn't speak until the engine started. Paris moved around us in soft gold streaks. At one point, I looked down and saw the text again. We're going younger. Nothing personal. Alaric glanced over. Your hands didn't shake, he said. That told me everything I needed. I didn't ask what he thought he needed. At the reception held in a converted gallery just off the Place Vendôme, he stayed by my side, not hovering, not managing, just present. He never once mentioned Calvera by name. Instead, he said things like, "What do you think of Leora's spring-cut lines? And there's a vacancy in our identity. I'm looking for someone who knows the difference between disruption and noise." I sipped from a glass of dry white and let the pause linger. Finally, he asked, "If you're free next Saturday, I think we should talk." I met his gaze fully then. 11, I said. Your place or mine? He smiled, not wide, not for show, just the kind that meant the answer was already understood. We didn't exchange cards. We didn't need to. When I stepped back into the night, Paris felt different. The silence had weight again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was the kind that lives right before thunder. By the time I returned to the hotel, I already knew what I'd wear to that meeting, and I already knew which file I would print first. The lights in the Calvera building lobby were too bright, always had been, meant to evoke clarity and modernity, but today they just made everything feel clinical. I didn't pause at reception. The guard gave me a strained nod, one of those reflexive greetings that dies halfway out of the mouth when they remember you're not supposed to be here anymore. The elevator opened onto the executive floor, and it was already happening. My nameplate was gone. My inbox had been deactivated. My calendar cleared. They hadn't waited. Of course they hadn't. Inside my office, 3 boxes sat stacked on the low bench beneath the window, labeled in someone else's handwriting. 1 was taped. 2 were not. A note would have been too much to expect. The framed photos were gone, but the shadow of their presence still clung to the walls. I checked the drawers. Empty. Even the fabric swatches I'd tacked behind the door ripped down. It was clean. Purposefully so. HR arrived 7 minutes later. A woman I'd met only once before, all oversized glasses and crisis PR tone. She smiled too widely, like she'd practiced. "We're framing this as a mutual departure," she said gently, like she was telling me the weather had changed. "We're not?" I replied. "Well, that's how it's being positioned, that you've chosen to step away to pursue creative independence." I picked up one of the boxes. "Tell Corin he could have tried a line that hadn't been used on 3 other women before me." She blinked. "Excuse me, never mind." She asked me to sign a few final papers. I didn't read them. I'd had my lawyer do that already. I pushed the pen back across the desk and stood. "Oh, and Ms. Kane," she added. "We'd appreciate it if you didn't discuss internal decisions with the press just to ensure a smooth transition." I looked at her over the edge of the box. "You're not that interesting." I didn't look back as I walked out. Not when the doors slid closed behind me, not when the elevator hit the lobby floor. The only sound I noticed was the gentle shift of paper inside the top box, specifically the folder I'd slipped in just before I left Paris. The atelier was tucked behind an unmarked steel door in Tribeca. No signage, no receptionist. Just a silent hallway, and then warmth, soft wood walls, a single sculptural pendant light, and a long table set for 2. Alaric stood when I entered. No handshake, just a nod that said this wasn't a pitch. He poured coffee into delicate white cups instead of offering wine. "I thought we'd skip the theater," he said. I sat across from him. No makeup, no press facade, just me and the folder I'd carried from Calvera. I set it down beside the cutlery and waited. "I won't pretend this isn't strategic," he began. "Your departure destabilizes them. That's useful to me." I nodded. "Honesty suits you." "But I want more than disruption," he continued. "Maison Leora is expanding. North America digital campaigns, a full realignment of brand architecture. I don't want borrowed identity. I want evolution. And you want me to lead it." He didn't smile. Just said, "From the ground up. Total creative authority. Hiring messaging campaign design. 10% equity. A seat on the board." There was a silence between us, but it didn't last long. I opened the folder. Inside were the notes I'd kept from the Calvera European Partnership Project. I'd been cut from the one that had been pitched while I was in Berlin giving a keynote. "You've already started," he said, glancing at the layouts. "Of course you have." I closed the folder not to protect it, but to mark the end of something. I didn't ask about budget. I didn't ask about team. Those things could be built. "I'm in," I said, "but I won't do this halfway." He slid the contract across the table like it had been waiting for me. I read enough to confirm the essentials: creative freedom, ownership, my name where it mattered. I signed before dessert. After, as I stepped into the crisp night, the doorman didn't ask if I needed a ride. He just opened the car already waiting and nodded once as if he'd seen the handover of a crown. By Monday, I was dialing names. No one at Calvera remembered how to spell. I didn't post anything. No quotes about new beginnings, no cryptic captions, no staged photos under flattering lighting. Let them wonder. Instead, I opened my old black notebook, the one I never synced to the cloud, and started dialing. The first call was to Renata Velez, the stylist behind 3 red carpet looks that made headlines not because they were loud, but because they knew when not to speak. She picked up after one ring. "Varel," she said. "Finally." We didn't talk about Calvera. We didn't need to. I asked if she was still working with the Velan Group in LA. She said yes. I said I had something new in motion. She didn't ask for a press deck, just said, "Send me swatches by next week." The next morning, I called Dwayne in Milan, the boutique director who used to handwrite thank you notes with every private purchase. He was still bitter about Calvera's last capsule collection. It looked like it was designed by AI, he said. What happened to texture? I told him Maison Leora was ready to remember how fabric breathes. He paused, then put me down for the first preview window. Paris or New York, I'll fly. By Thursday, I had 6 confirmed meetings, 4 soft commitments, and 1 unsolicited call from a celebrity agent asking if Leora's rebrand had room for a signature face. I hadn't even sent out a single campaign concept. I didn't have to. Friday afternoon, Tess forwarded me a forwarded email from Calvera's retail team. Harrow's in Boston, one of their oldest stockists, had just pulled their spring order. No explanation given, just a note, reallocating shelf space to brands aligned with our evolving values. No one said my name, but I heard it anyway. I closed the notebook satisfied. Not with noise, but with motion, a different kind of momentum. Leora hadn't released a statement, hadn't posted a teaser, hadn't said a word. But the Fashion Week dinner circles were buzzing. By the end of the day, Calvera had called an emergency meeting. And by the time I looked at the clock, it was already time to draft the first campaign board. It started with a blog post on a niche industry site, the kind of outlet only insiders and interns read, the kind where truth hides before it hits headlines. They published a grainy photo of my stripped office fluorescent lights, catching the bare wall where my campaign boards had once hung. The caption read, "Departures are rarely as mutual as the press releases claim. No name, no quotes." But the implication was clear, and it didn't stop there. Over the next 48 hours, emails leaked. Meeting notes too, some from decks I'd never even been allowed to see decisions made while I was across the country, giving keynotes in my own name. A scanned memo from HR labeled my exit as timely repositioning. Another email from a junior PR rep asked if the press statement should downplay her legacy tone. Legacy tone. By Wednesday, the rumors had calcified into something sharper. Hashtags appeared on industry Twitter. Your chicane built, int maison misstep. Legacy was hers. Someone sent me a screenshot of a Calvera group chat where a digital design lead asked, "So we're just pretending she didn't build this entire line. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to." What surprised me most was how many of them remembered. People I'd thought had moved on. People I'd once corrected gently in design reviews, mentored through internships vouched for in closed-door meetings. They hadn't forgotten after all. They were just waiting. I heard from Tess late Thursday. "Corin's in full damage control," she said. "He called you unstable in a memo, says you ghosted the board." Classic character spin. I smiled. Because I hadn't ghosted anyone. I had email threads, meeting cancellations, call logs showing every unanswered request. I had screenshots. I had proof that I was slowly written out pixel by pixel by people who thought branding overruled memory. And I had no intention of going to war. Not yet. I spent that night pulling up documents, logging timelines, creating a folder labeled Quiet Proof. Then I called Alaric and asked him if Leora's legal team had an appetite for clarity. I spent the weekend assembling a paper trail no one expected me to have. Not because it was buried, but because they assumed I wouldn't bother. They underestimated the quiet kind of woman, the one who remembers subject lines and notices when meetings move to calendars she can't access. Emails, rescheduled briefings, decks I was removed from the morning they went live, notes from design leads who were told not to CC me after March, an invite labeled Strategy Refresh, which turned out to be the meeting where they cut me loose. I cataloged everything, not to retaliate, not yet. Leora was moving forward. Alaric and I reviewed the campaign plan over espresso and calm, year-long rollout, new product language. U.S. expansion driven by designers too bold for the boardroom. The team was coming together, visionaries, outliers, veterans with too much instinct for trend-chasing brands. Clients were watching. A boutique chain asked about fall exclusivity. A veteran stylist sent over a list of clients who missed detail. My inbox filled without fanfare. Then the cease and desist arrived. Calvera's letter accused me of IP interference, brand confusion, reputational sabotage, vague timelines, anonymous tips, legal theater. I read it twice, not out of worry, but to confirm how weak it really was. Then I forwarded it to Leora's legal counsel with 3 words. They blinked first. An hour later, Alaric called. "They're hoping we fold." "We won't," I said, "and we don't respond." He paused. "What do you want, readiness?" I said, "for when they overstep again." Because they would. Corin Maddox didn't understand silence as strength. He only heard noise and mistook its absence for surrender. I wasn't going to explain myself, not in interviews, not yet. But I printed the documents and slipped them into a leather portfolio, just in case the truth needed a microphone. The Met cloisters glowed under soft candlelight, the arches casting long shadows across tapestries, older than any of us. Alaric didn't believe in fanfare, but he believed in symbolism, and this place, ancient, quiet, impossible to ignore, was perfect. I wore slate silk custom cut by a 27-year-old designer from Detroit who'd never been to Paris but knew how power should move. No embroidery, no logo, just shape, color, and intent. People watched me differently now, not as an accessory to a man's empire, not as a ghost of a brand that had outgrown its roots. Tonight, I wasn't the woman behind the curtain. I was the curtain, the frame, the structure they'd mistaken for decor. Alaric spoke from a modest platform. "I don't believe in long speeches," he said, voice steady, "but I believe in vision. And tonight I have the honor of introducing Maison Leora's new global creative lead, Virel Kane." The applause didn't burst. It swelled like recognition, taking its time, stretching into a wave that couldn't be ignored. By the end of it, I wasn't smiling for their benefit. I smiled because I meant it. I made my rounds past editors who once passed over my name boutique owners who had just missed my emails, former collaborators who now leaned in with reverence. They didn't apologize. They pivoted. I let them. Halfway through the night, my phone buzzed in my clutch. A name I hadn't seen in weeks. Corin Maddox. Text only. Can we talk, just the two of us? No lawyers, no damage control. Just him finally afraid of silence. I didn't respond. Instead, I waited until the string quartet paused between sets, stepped out onto the terrace, and opened my phone. I uploaded a photo someone had just taken me standing between two Leora designers, their arms linked with mine, all three of us mid-laugh. The caption was simple. We're just getting started. By the next morning, 3 legacy clients had reached out to Leora for meetings, and one Italian label quietly postponed its Calvera partnership. Momentum didn't need noise, it needed proof, and I was done proving anything to anyone but myself. The studio buzzed with the kind of energy you don't fake fabric scraps underfoot, espresso cups balanced on cutting tables, laughter mixed with arguments over thread weight. We'd converted an old steel warehouse in Brooklyn into something that breathed floor-to-ceiling light, raw beam space for invention. Today was our first full concept shoot for the U.S. campaign. The theme board taped to the wall read, "Inheritance Rewritten." I moved slowly between workstations, not to monitor, but to witness. A young designer was pinning pleats on a sample jacket made from repurposed silk curtains. Another was reviewing light tests with a photographer too young to know what a flashbulb used to sound like. One of our interns, Amira, 22, sharp as glass, stood in the corner with a sketch pad and a nervous question on her face. She stepped closer as I adjusted the collar on a model's look. "What's the hardest lesson you've learned?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I tightened a stitch with my fingertips, smoothing the shoulder line, then looked her in the eye. "They'll take everything you give," I said. "Your weekends, your ideas, your calm. And when it suits them, they'll still call you replaceable." Her brow furrowed, lips slightly parted. "That's how you know," I continued. "It was yours all along." She nodded slowly and jotted something in the corner of her sketchbook. I could tell it wasn't just a note, it was the kind of sentence that stays with a person, the kind that becomes armor. Behind the camera, the set was ready. The photographer gave me a thumbs up, the lights began to warm, and the model stepped into the frame, draped in hand-stitched slate gray. No noise, just form, just intention. I stepped out of the shot line, not because I was retreating, but because I'd already shaped what needed to be seen. The shutter clicked. The monitor lit up with the first frame, and I saw it. Not a comeback, not a revenge arc, just something entirely mine. As the team gathered around the screen, I watched their faces more than the image, because legacy doesn't arrive with applause. It starts when they stop asking who gave you permission.